If you've ever thought about road tripping through the Western United States, stay tuned for the ultimate road trip discussion. Here's a 30-second teaser of the episode.
You can see the tallest trees in the world and the hottest place on Earth, and they're like 7 hours away from each other.
Like, if you have a car that can get you off-roading, you can see so many cool things on your road trip through the Western United States.
Especially if you're down to rough it a little bit and you're big into outdoor recreation, camping is such a great way to save a buck.
Western United States cover a massive chunk of the country, and unless you have years to hit the road, you have to first decide what area you'd like to cover and for how much time. Hi there, and welcome to the Travel Lemming podcast, where we discuss the best travel advice and opinions with expert travel writers. I'm your host, Betty Hurd. I am an Arizona native, but I just moved to Los Angeles, where I am in my brand new apartment right now. So I'm very excited to talk about all things West Coast road trip. Today, I'm joined by two women with years of road trip experience all across the Western United States. We're going to talk about everything from the most iconic national parks to lesser known roadside attractions, as well as how to prepare for your road trip, how to stay safe, and more. First, I want to welcome Abigail Bliss, one of our fantastic editors at Travel Lemming. Abigail, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Abigail Bliss. I'm a freelance writer and travel loving editor. I've lived in Denver for nearly a decade, and my two doggies, my husband and I, have traveled through much of the Western United States via road trip, a lot of national parks, mountain towns, hidden gems. We're really big into outdoor recreation, so I'm excited to be part of the show today.
So happy to see you again and have you on the show for something that I know you do quite often. You're always on the road. So, for those who haven't seen it, Abigail was on the podcast for our third episode talking about her experience road tripping through Ireland. So, definitely check that out after this episode if you want to take your road trip abroad. And also, welcome one of our senior travel writers, Laura McFarland. Laura, how are you today?
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm a senior travel writer here at Travel Lemming. I'm born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I recently took a year off to go travel around the world and do a working holiday over in Australia. But I've come back to San Francisco because I love it so much and it allows me to road trip all around the West Coast. I am so excited to be here and get to talk about road tripping.
Absolutely. It's so lovely to have you both here. I think between the three of us, we have probably hundreds of hours of road trip experience between us. So, we have a lot to discuss. And I want to start with where you guys have road tripped to get a clearer picture of your experience driving the west of the United States. So, Abigail, I'll start with you. Where have you been?
I feel like it's easier to share where I haven't been. I have extensively driven throughout the Western United States and even beyond that. Yeah, I feel like aside from the Pacific Northwest, my two doggies, my husband and I have been pretty much everywhere. We are based out of Denver, and so we know Colorado like the back of our hand and have extensively road tripped through the Colorado mountains. But aside from that, road tripping is just our primary mode of travel. And so we've done northern New Mexico, a lot of Arizona, California Pacific Coast Highway, also some few brief drives through Nevada, a lot of Utah, Western Montana, good amount of Wyoming, South Dakota, and a little bit of North Dakota as well. So yeah, we've kind of been all over the place and just so many great adventures on those trips.
Yes, quite the repertoire. You've been everywhere, it seems. And Laura, what about you? Where have you road tripped on the West Coast?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. So growing up, my family always did a lot of road trips around California, primarily to road trip down to LA to visit family. So it was just always a thing that I really enjoyed doing growing up. And then when I got into college was when I really started taking a lot of road trips, either by myself or with groups of friends. So I have driven from San Francisco all the way up to Seattle, driven from San Francisco down to San Diego. So pretty much everything in California, a lot of Oregon and Washington. And then I've driven across Nevada more times than I would like to admit. There's not a lot to do there, but I do have some hidden gems in Nevada. And then I've also done a lot of road trips around Utah as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it seems like you've got a lot of coastal experience, which I think is awesome. I'm from Arizona, so I've taken road trips all over the state of Arizona. I've driven from Arizona up the PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway, to Washington, also all over Colorado. I used to go visit my brother in Utah, so we drive through Monument Valley. I've gone from Colorado to Wyoming to see Yellowstone, all over California, Death Valley, Yosemite, lots of national parks. And a lot of these trips involve family members, but some of them I also did solo. So I'd say the most notable ones I've taken were my photography trip to Death Valley and Yosemite with my brother, moving my cousin from Tucson, Arizona to Seattle. And then I also would visit my other brother in Salt Lake City by driving through Monument Valley and Moab Arches National Park when I was a little bit younger. So lots of great experience on the road there. But where is your absolute favorite place that you've road tripped? Laura, I'll start with you.
Ah, this one's so hard because I feel like I have so many memories, but a road trip that really stands out to me was when a group of friends and I in college road tripped from San Francisco all the way to Denver. And so we drove all around Utah. We went to across the Utah Salt Flats outside of Salt Lake City, which, if you haven't been, that's one of the coolest places to drive, I think, in the United States. And then we went to Moab. We went down to Zion. We drove up through southern Wyoming and did some really cool rock climbing in southern Wyoming, and then finally made it all the way to Denver and was able to road trip a little bit around Colorado. And so it was, I think, cumulatively like 40 hours of driving, but I just remember it as being such an amazing time with the most incredible landscapes.
Very cool. Abigail, what about you?
Kind of funny enough, I think my favorite road trip is the state that I forgot to mention in my overview, which is Idaho. I really loved traveling through Idaho. For a mountain destination, I just felt like it was a lot more remote than some of the other states that I've been to. And so, for that reason, dispersed camping was plentiful, hardly saw any crowds, trails were empty. And so, just a really special experience to get to be outside and really connect with nature without the crowds, which can be pretty common in some of the other road trip destinations we'll talk about. So yeah, I drove from it was on a trip out to Tetons and Yellowstone and entered into the Idaho border through the Idaho border and hit Twin Falls, went out to Boise, and then followed the Salmon River all the way up to Montana. And so just following the Salmon River was my favorite stretch. There's all these hot springs that you can pretty much just pull off, on the side of the road and go and enjoy for free. Some of them are hikes, which are, even more remote. Just gorgeous trails, especially through Stanley, Idaho, and the Sawtooths. That was one of my favorite regions and still is probably one of my favorite hiking destinations I've yet been to. So, yeah, I really like Idaho a lot and would highly recommend a road trip out there.
Yeah, I feel like Idaho's kinda up and coming. I mean, maybe just some people don't know about it, and the people who do are kind of trying to keep it hidden because I really I thought that Idaho was just like potato farmland before I'd ever
Yeah.
gone, which I think a lot of people have that kind of stereotypical image of it in their heads, and then the first time I ever went was also going Wyoming over to Idaho and, like, seeing the Grand Tetons, and it was, like, some of the most dramatic, stunning mountains I've ever seen, and it was so, so beautiful. So, man, that's awesome. I would love to go back to Idaho and see some more of the stuff that you've seen before. And then for me, my favorite road trip, honestly, I'm biased, but I just love Arizona road tripping so much. There's so much to see, so many beautiful landscapes that are really, really different from each other too, and you can pack so much in. So I'd say when I took a trip with my brother, we went camping all along the northern part of Arizona. We saw Page, Arizona, which has Horseshoe Bend, Lake Powell, Antelope Canyon, and then we went on a very obscure sandy road for several hours to this place called White Pocket that looks like Mars. Like, it's this really, really cool isolated camping spot, and we were just out there for about a week, and, there's nobody around because nobody can really get to it, so and, of course, we'll talk about this later too, like, what kind of vehicle you can have on your road trip and your goals, but there are some awesome places, like, if you have a car that can get you off-roading, you can see so many cool things on your road trip through the Western United States. I mean, there's some very, very interesting and otherworldly destinations that you could not possibly see from the freeway. So, yeah, that's my favorite place to road trip, Northern Arizona, also other parts of Arizona. But, each experience you're going to have on the road is going to be vastly different from another person, even if you take the same exact route. So, kind of depends what you're driving, what time of year, who you're with, and your goals for the trip. So, I want to talk about that last idea a little bit more, which is setting goals. And I think the first step is choosing where you want to go. So, obviously, the Western United States cover a massive chunk of the country. And unless you have years to hit the road, you have to first decide what area you'd like to cover and for how much time. So, do you want to see the desert, the mountains, the coast? So, that's the first step. And if you're not sure, we'll discuss all that in just a moment. So, let's start with mountains. Abigail, you're a Colorado native and you've driven through tons of mountain ranges. Can you tell us your thoughts on the best mountain road trips in the Western United States?
I think there's a lot to see in Colorado alone. I actually have a guide on Travel Lemming, which is a 10-day Colorado road trip guide. So, I mean, that alone, right, is a lengthy trip. There's so much to see in this state alone. And I think that Colorado just has, quite a bit of variety as far as landscapes. The state is known for its mountains, absolutely. But there's also, the entire eastern side of the state, which is entirely plains. And then you get close to like the Utah border and it's very much desertous. And so I feel like you can actually see quite a few different types of landscapes in Colorado. But of course, the mountains are most iconic. The Western Slope is where I would point people if you don't have a full 10 days. I would say head to that region, whether starting in Denver or starting in Grand Junction and flying into that airport. The Western Slope is just some of those quintessential Colorado landscapes. So that includes Aspen and the Maroon Bells, which is considered the most photographed place in the state. Also, Crested Butte, which is highly known for its wildflowers. I know, Betty, you've been there, and it's a really special spot to me. Paonia and Palisade are both known for their orchards and vineyards. So you've got a bit of Colorado wine country out in that region as well. Yeah, I feel like Colorado is a great destination if you want to see the mountains and even more variety past that.
Yeah, Abigail, you're making me really want a road trip around Colorado a little bit more because I've only really seen Rocky Mountain National Park, but even doing some hikes there and doing the scenic drive in Rocky Mountain National Park was some of the best views of mountains I've ever seen, and actually really reminded me of some mountains near where I grew up, which is the California Sierra Nevada mountains. Driving around the Sierra Nevada mountains in California is one of my favorite road trips. I think that there's so much to see, whether you come in from the western side and you get to see like famous national parks like Yosemite or Sequoia and Kings Canyon, or a really underrated road trip is you can drive the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains on Highway 395. And this gives you the view of all the backside of the mountains that not a lot of people get to see because it's a little bit of a trek to get over there. But you can see Mount Whitney, which is the tallest mountain in the lower 48 states. You can also drive up and go to Lake Tahoe, which is this beautiful alpine lake just nestled in the mountains. And then you can do some really, really incredible scenic drives just around, alpine lakes and forest. And it could take you weeks to just explore everything the Sierra Nevada has to offer.
I love that. Yeah, I too have so badly wanted to explore more of California because aside from driving along the coast, I haven't gotten to hike or explore very much of the Sierras. So, another one to add to the bucket list. Thinking about a few other mountain destinations, I talked a little bit about Idaho and the Sawtooth Range there. Western Montana, too, you could do that in the same road trip, and that connects into Glacier National Park, which again is just an iconic mountain destination. I'd also like to mention to, give a shout out to South Dakota because I feel like when people think about Western road trips, it's really more of, right, like the central part of the country, but there are some gorgeous mountains through there. On the western side of South Dakota, the Black Hills are one of the most beautiful places that I've yet to explore. And yeah, I didn't really associate South Dakota with mountains, but Custer State Park takes you on some gorgeous scenic drives through the mountains over there. Wind Cave is another really special national park that I think is a little bit more of a hidden gem, not a national park that's oftentimes thought of, right, when it comes to mountain destinations or national parks in general. Also, Mount Rushmore, iconic history, landmarks. So there's a lot to see in that state as well.
Amazing. So, and now Laura, our San Francisco native, I figured you'd be the coastal expert. So, what are the best places to road
Yes.
trip on the West Coast?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked me this question. Yeah, I've driven pretty much everywhere from San Diego up to Seattle, all along Highway 1. And there's some parts of it that are really, really noteworthy and stunning, but there's some parts of it that I would skip. So I think the thing that comes to mind when people think of driving Highway 1, the Pacific Coast Highway, people usually think of the Southern California sections. So, like San Diego up to Long Beach is really, really beautiful. You're driving right along the ocean pretty much the whole time. Once you get into LA, it's a little bit trickier. I don't love the LA sections because you're going to get stuck in traffic. Just brave through it, it'll be fine. Some other notable sections, I think, from in Southern California are from Malibu to Santa Barbara. That is one of my favorite sections of driving in California. It's just absolutely stunning. And there's not a lot of traffic and there's all these cute little towns that you can stop in along the way, like Ventura or Santa Barbara. However, one of the most famous sections of Highway 1 is Big Sur, and that's a section where it's completely mountainous on one side and just the most stunning, dramatic ocean cliffs on the other, and you can see the ocean just for miles, and there's barely any towns along the whole coast. It's just like really, really tiny outcroppings. However, the one thing I always caution people who are wanting to drive Big Sur is that for the past several years, there have been road closures. It's an area that's very, very susceptible to landslides and mudslides. And so down in a certain section of it, for the past several years, they've been working on the road. And so you can't actually currently drive all the way through Big Sur. You have to either go down from the north or go up from the south and then turn around. You can't make it the whole way through. So I always caution people to check the roads in Big Sur before you plan your road trip because there's not a lot of places to cut back. So if you're driving and starting from the south, you may drive 2.5 hours and then realize you have to drive the whole 2.5 back because you can't actually make it through. So there's a website you can always go check. And that would be my number one advice for if you want to drive Big Sur.
I actually just made that mistake when I moved from San Francisco to Phoenix less than a year ago. I just put in the map Big Sur. I didn't look up the website or anything. So my boyfriend and I, it was like our main goal to go to Big Sur on our path back to Arizona. And we got there after taking like a 2-hour detour on, like the little coastal windy road, which was gorgeous. And there's just a cop standing in the road with a blockade saying that we had to turn around, and there was nothing on Google Maps or Apple Maps. I think we were using Waze too, like, we always have all of our maps open. Nothing said that it was shut down. There weren't any signs ahead of it either saying that it was shut down. I don't know why, and maybe that's changed since then, but yeah, we definitely made a huge mistake there because then we had to just turn around and we didn't get to see Big Sur, and it probably added 2 to 3 hours to our drive. So definitely make sure when you're going to some of those coastal places that, like you said, Laura, are susceptible to landslides, check out the websites, make sure that they're open and that they're accessible because it really throws a wrench in your plans if you have to add so many hours to your drive.
Yeah, I'll jump in there too and say that I made the exact same mistake in 2017. So I think that just demonstrates how often that stretch of road closes. Like it really does seem very much constant. So I made the same mistake, drove probably 2 or 3 extra hours than needed. But if you can make it there, I hear it's very much well worth it.
It is. And let me clarify that Big Sur, when people talk about Big Sur, they're talking about a whole like 4 hour stretch of the coastline that pretty much runs from the central California coast all the way up to where it starts to become Northern California. And so you can drive sections of it and you will be in Big Sur. Like it's a whole area, but you just can't drive like from the southern end all the way up to the northern end and keep going on Highway 1. So it's definitely possible to see parts of it still, but yeah, just don't try to drive all the way through. Another favorite part of Highway 1 that I think is really underrated is the Northern California coast. So maybe I'm biased because I'm from San Francisco, but the stretch from San Francisco all the way up to Mendocino is, I think, one of the prettiest. This is where you will get actually the most constant ocean views because you're driving through really, really small towns, a lot of really good seafood, kind of small fishing areas. Mendocino is a beautiful little town with a lot of wineries and really cute, like seaside cottages. So this is, I think, maybe one of the best parts of Highway 1, but a lot of people are just focused on the Southern California section, so they don't get to this section, but it's my personal favorite.
Laura, do you know how long it takes to go from Southern California to Northern California via Highway 1?
Yeah, I would say depending on the traffic, it could take anywhere from like 13 to 18 hours, depending on how many times you stop as well. It's just amazing to see the difference in the landscapes. When you're in Southern California, you have like the ocean and the sun and the desert. And then as you make your way up to Northern California, you start to have mountains and redwoods on your right and the ocean on your left. And it's just like one of the coolest ways to see the landscape change. And then a lot of far Northern California with all the redwoods and trees really starts to look like the Oregon coast. One thing to note is that when you do make it up to the top of Northern California, Highway 1 turns into Highway 101. And this happens right around Redwood National Park. So if you're going to see Redwood National Park and you're like, why can't I take Highway 1 anymore? Because it turns into the 101. And so then if you want to take Highway 1, you're technically going to be on 101 all the way up through Oregon and Washington, I believe.
Good thing to note. And Oregon and Washington, yeah, the coast I feel like is so different from like a big chunk of the California coast. And it's really, really gorgeous there too. I've only been to Seaside, Oregon, so I haven't really seen a ton of that coastal area. But if you're looking for like dramatic seaside cliffs, dense forest, cooler weather, I think that you should definitely consider taking a road trip through the Pacific Northwest.
So a lot of the Oregon coast I will say it looks very similar. A lot of it is just like ocean, trees, very rugged. There's a lot of really, really nice small towns, but it's not super populated. So it's very, very out there. I think a best part of a Washington coastal road trip is driving through Olympic National Park. I've just heard the most incredible things about the Olympic Peninsula.
Okay, and now I want to talk a little bit about the desert scenery, which you will find in Southern California. So you can kind of blend like the coastal vibe with the desert, and then you can kind of make your way more inland to Arizona. So, as an Arizona native, I love to represent my desert home. And I think a lot of people envision scenes from Arizona when they think about planning a road trip. So, we just have so many beautiful landscapes that are so famous, like the Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Sedona, Petroglyph National Forest, and so many other gorgeous natural wonders. So, if that's the vibe you want, I highly recommend taking a road trip through Arizona. To me, it's just a no-brainer because there's so much that you won't see if you stay within the limits of the big cities like Phoenix or Tucson. Yet so many of those places are super accessible and affordable. So you just really be remiss to not venture outside of the capital or Tucson. And I mean, you can visit some of the most iconic Southwestern sites like the Grand Canyon and Sedona within just a few hours, really, of these places. So, super easy to do if you rent a car or if you have your own car, which we can talk a little bit about more later. I also have an Arizona road trip itinerary for 1 week that covers all the must see spots, in my opinion. So, we'll link that as well as Abigail's and Laura's itineraries that they've written if you want to put your faith in our planning. So, in addition to Arizona, I think New Mexico has some really incredible landscapes. It's called the Land of Enchantment for a reason, right? So, I've only really been to White Sands National Park, which is this massive playground of snow white sand dunes in the southern part of New Mexico. And it's an incredible spot for photography. And I definitely recommend road tripping there if it's within your radius. The only thing is, it's a little bit isolated from other spots, but if that's your main destination, it's well worth the drive. I also think California's Death Valley National Park, one of my favorite road trip destinations in the whole world. I camped there for several days and saw some of the most incredible otherworldly landscapes I've ever seen in my life. There were sand dunes, insane mountains, just really arid valleys, and then even the racetrack, which, if you haven't heard of the racetrack, it's this place where, because of the way the landscape is and the way the wind runs through the valley, it's so dry that these big boulders that are on the ground there move with the wind. Anyway, it's just like such an insane place where there's all these wild geological things that are happening there all the time that don't really happen anywhere else. Of course, you want to plan to go there not during the summertime because it will probably be impossible to enjoy. It gets so hot there. I believe it's the hottest. That's where the hottest point in the United States is. So,
On Earth, it's the hottest place on
oh,
Earth.
the hottest place on earth. Okay, so definitely
Yes.
don't go in the summertime. Go in the wintertime. It's very enjoyable then. I think I went in January and it was perfect.
Yeah, Betty, I would really second that. Do not go in the summertime. I went in late spring, and that was even unbearable. I saw so many people that were road tripping there in their big camper vans with their air conditioning, but I was road tripping in my tiny little car with my tent, and it was so hot and so windy, and it was an amazing landscape. I loved it so much, but you just kind of could only do activities until like 10 a.m., and then all I did was just try to find I actually found, like, a hotel with a pool and just sat there during the day because I couldn't stand the temperatures. So just really, really check the weather before you go to Death Valley.
Right, and we'll definitely discuss the best time of year to plan a road trip for multiple places in a little bit too, but it's a really important factor because you're probably going to be hitting up multiple destinations. So you want to make sure that you can enjoy where you're going when you get there.
Yeah, I know that you kind of slid into it, but you mentioned New Mexico, and I'd love to just touch on that a little bit more. Betty, you mentioned White Sands National Park, and I haven't really explored very much of southern New Mexico, but I have extensively explored northern New Mexico. I do kind of like a biannual trip down to Taos, New Mexico every year, and it's a really special place of mine. And I just think that, again, similar to what I was saying about Colorado, it's somewhere that you can, northern New Mexico is somewhere that you can see both mountains and a lot of desert scenery kind of in one go. And so I would highly recommend kind of following the same road trip destinations that I've done, which would be Taos, New Mexico, Santa Fe, Bandelier National Monument over near just west of Santa Fe is a really incredible park that I highly recommend, kind of more of an under the radar type gem. If you continue west, there's Jemez Hot Springs, which again, just remote hot springs that you can hike to, also some resorts. So just another off the beaten path type destination. And then you get even more remote heading into some reservation land on the Ashislepo Wilderness and Beastie Badlands and Chaco. Chaco was built more than a millennia ago. The other wilderness areas just feature all these really unique rock formations, kind of some of the things that you might see in Utah as far as like hoodoos and whatnot. But again, just way less crowded than what is like a Canyonlands or Arches National Park. So yeah, kind of just a couple hidden gems to maybe put on your radar.
Yeah,
So
I feel like New Mexico is a really great place to go if you wanna get away from people, because I think a lot of people do kind of skip over it when they're thinking about going to a bunch of national parks that are gonna be jam-packed with so many crowds, and New Mexico is just so gorgeous and has so much history too. So I appreciate your insight there because I haven't been able to take those road trips yet, and I know that you have driven there with your husband and your dogs, right, multiple times?
several times. Yeah, actually Taos is special. It's where we adopted one of our doggies. It's where my husband proposed. It's yeah, just kind of home away from home. We go there very often. So, but all of the surrounding sites there too are just so stunning, especially if you want to see desert scenery.
I
So,
love it. And you also mentioned Utah, so I want to touch on that a little bit because some of my favorite desert landscapes are in Utah. I mean, it shares Monument Valley with Arizona. Right at the northern border of Arizona and the very, very southern bottom of Utah is one of the most incredible places to drive through. You can also see Arches National Park right next to the town of Moab, which has these incredible natural archways made of this beautiful red rock. There's also Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon, which I actually haven't been to yet, but I think both of you have.
Bryce Canyon is my favorite, one of my favorite national parks in the United States. I think Bryce Canyon and Zion, I could go back to them time and time again, and they would always be so beautiful and just crazy looking, like you're on another planet. It's incredible.
yeah, highly recommend a trip to both. I would say Red Rock Canyon Open Space, which is right outside of Bryce, is a really great hidden gem. I had my doggies on that trip, so they weren't able to really do very much in the national park. And so you get a lot of the same scenery right outside of the park. In addition, Zion's also very special to me. It's where one of my closest friends lives, just outside of that park. And we've done a few canyoneering adventures through there, and I think that just makes that park especially unique among all the other national parks. So there's a lot to see in Utah, both as far as like the tourist route, but also just tons of open spaces, wilderness areas that you can really escape those crowds. So you kind of get the best of both worlds on that trip.
So that covers the main landscapes, mountains, coast, and desert, at least for the three of us, in our opinion, where we think are some of the best places to road trip. And again, I do want to just make a quick note that the three of us are in our 20s, and obviously we have a little bit more freedom because we don't have kids. And so if you're someone who's trying to plan a road trip with the whole family, hopefully a lot of what we're talking about still can pertain to, your trip planning and be helpful. But we definitely think like, one day we'll probably have an episode where we interview some of our moms on the team and kind of talk to them about how they plan for bringing the whole family on the trip. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Obviously, everyone has different lifestyles and different goals on their trips. A lot of the places we've talked about are family friendly, so you can definitely add these to your itinerary no matter who you are. So now I want to talk about money. So let's start with the most expensive places to road trip. Laura, I'm going to start with you because you live in one of the most
Yeah.
expensive US cities. And California, I think everyone kind of knows right off the bat that it's going to be up there a little bit more in price, especially in terms of gas. So yeah, I'll
Yes.
let you talk on that.
Yeah, California does have the highest average gas prices in the United States. Typically, gas here, I mean, as of right now in 2025, gas here is around $4 or $5 a gallon, and the national average is typically around a dollar below where California sits. I think if people are wondering why California is a little bit more expensive, it's because of the stricter environmental regulations that we have in this state and trying to move towards electric vehicle usage. So, if you do have an electric vehicle, we have a lot of really great charging spots around California. So it is actually possible to do an EV road trip around California, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I think for saving money in California, there's a really great app that I use called Gas Buddy, and you can look up where the cheapest gas station near you is. So that helps if you are trying to, get some good gas prices while you're on your road trip. And also fill up outside of mountain towns. Mountain towns or anywhere that's a little bit more remote is always going to be more expensive than if you fill up in a city or somewhere where there's more gas available. So I've noticed that when I'm driving up to the Sierra Nevada mountains, the gas there is always at least like 30 cents, maybe even 50 cents more than if I just filled up before I start driving into the mountains. So that would be my number one tip.
Yeah, I just for example, when I filled up my tank in San Francisco, it was $96. And then when I filled up in Phoenix, it was like 55, like something insanely different. So
Yeah.
it's pricey for sure. So you do need to factor in prices if you plan on road tripping through California, but I do think it's worth it for all the sites that you get because the state offers so many gorgeous road trip destinations. So, you might just have to save a little bit more if you're more of a budget traveler. What you gain definitely outweighs the cost of an expensive road trip. And then if you are taking that coastal route from Northern California through Oregon and Washington, both Oregon and Washington are also very pricey. Washington actually has the third highest gas prices in the US, California being the first, Hawaii the second, and then Washington lands that third spot. So just something to keep in mind if you plan on taking a West Coast road trip. So, yeah, I really recommend creating a budget before your road trip. And if these more expensive states or areas are on your must see list, just make sure you have a general idea of what you're going to pay in gas, hotels, park entrance fees, food, everything, because you definitely don't want to be on the road and then realize that you've gone through a massive chunk of your budget for the trip. So if you are a budget-focused road tripper, don't worry. There are some extremely affordable places to adventure in the Western US. So as I mentioned before, I'm from Arizona, and I think I can speak for the Grand Canyon State in saying that gas prices are affordable, hotels, campsites, park entrance fees are really fair, especially during the off season, like in the summertime, though I don't necessarily recommend traveling through Arizona in the summertime, but if you are really, really budget conscious, that is a good time to get those lower prices. And basically, you won't break the bank if you're road tripping through Arizona. Abigail, where are some cheaper road trip destinations you've traveled through?
I feel like a lot of the reason why I've been able to travel through so much of the US is because my husband and I have been budget travelers for a long time. And, I think that there's a lot of states that you can go to on a budget. I would say that, especially if you're down to rough it a little bit and you're big into outdoor recreation, camping is such a great way to save a buck. And I do feel like some of the more remote states, when you think about like New Mexico or Utah or Idaho, there's a lot of dispersed camping. Even if you don't reserve in advance, it's less crowded. So your likelihood of finding a spot, even rolling up on a Friday night, is still pretty solid. So I would say, some of those more remote states and being down to camp will definitely allow you to see more places on the cheap. Another thing, too, with places like when I think about Idaho, it's more centered around national forests than national parks. And so entrance is free. So when you think about like, you know, seeing Colorado's 4 national parks versus just going into national forest in Idaho, it's kind of a alternative, maybe cheaper destination to go to when you think about just activities cost, right?
I want to touch on something you said real quick, Abigail, about dispersed camping and just second that if you are someone who does like to camp, camping on BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management, or US Forest Service land is typically free and you can dispersed camp anywhere as long as you follow certain regulations. And so I've saved a ton of money during road tripping by just literally driving onto forest land and propping up my tent somewhere instead of having to pay for a motel or an actual physical campsite for the night, but you won't get the amenities of, like, having a bathroom, for example, so it's up to how much you wanna rough it.
Yeah, dispersed camping is really a lifesaver for me because if you're planning on camping for the entire road trip too, like some of those campsite fees are really steep. So if you can plan your trip around finding those free spots, you're going to save a ton. And just as an aside, I want to add that I've never personally road tripped anywhere else in the country besides the Western United States, since I've always lived on the West Coast. But Laura, I know you've had experience road tripping the East Coast. So do you have any thoughts on just how that differs from a West Coast road trip?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the biggest things that people discover about the Western United States if they haven't been there before is just how spread out and far apart everything is. I mean, it takes around 6 hours to drive from LA to San Francisco, California's 2 biggest cities. But if you're driving on the East Coast, you can drive 6 hours and see Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And that's like everything's just so much closer together on the East Coast. So if you're looking for maybe a shorter road trip that's more city focused, road tripping around the East Coast is really great, but also there's trains. Like, I don't typically like to road trip around the East Coast because you can take Amtrak between all the major cities that you want to see, and it's a beautiful train ride. So I'm a big fan of public transportation, but I think road tripping in the Western US is just so great because you get to go off the beaten path and see all these like landmarks and natural spaces and national parks. So if you're wanting to see more off the beaten path nature stuff in the East Coast and drive through like Vermont or New Hampshire, you'll definitely need a car. But if you're looking for a way to see a lot of great cities, I would recommend just taking the train between DC and Boston.
Yeah, that is kind of one of the downsides of the West Coast is we don't have the best public transportation. I wish so badly that we had like a killer train system But because
Mhm.
of that, and because of how spread out our states are, I think that's why it's such a popular road trip destination, which is kind of the beauty of it. There's so much of it that's just seemingly untouched. But yeah, great thing to keep in mind. So if you're not from the United States and you're kind of coming in and trying to plan what part of the country you want to see, everything that Laura just said is a great thing to keep in mind. So now, whether you're a first time road tripper or just haven't driven long distance in a while, I want to go over the most important things to know before you hit the road. So, Abigail, I will start with you. What are the best ways to prepare for a road trip before you go?
I think one of my biggest tips would be to make sure that your car is in order. So bring it in for a tune up, chat with a professional and make sure that, all your fluids and your meters and everything is up to date and ready for, hundreds, if not thousands of miles of driving in a short period of time. I would also say, like, there's no harm in getting a rental. My husband and I have done that on a few recent road trips just for the sake of knowing that we have, a very new vehicle with low mileage. And that also, I think, is another thing to keep in mind, especially if you want to go to some of these off the beaten path places. If you need four-wheel drive, that's something that you can maybe coordinate with a rental company if you don't have that sort of off roading type vehicle. I would also say download music, podcast, movies, all your digital needs before hitting the road, because in a lot of these places that we're discussing, it's very likely that you're going to lose service and maybe not even have the radio available. So, for some entertainment, would recommend downloading those things in advance. We talked a little bit about camping and that being, maybe your preferred accommodation. And if that's the case, I would say that your packing list is especially crucial. I made a spreadsheet that I've referred to for probably a decade now with all my sleep gear listed and my cooking supplies and all the different layers of clothing I might need. Because I think that, especially if you're camping, your packing list is so necessary. Same applies to, like we were saying, right? That a lot of these, towns are far and few between in certain areas. So, you might not see a Walmart for 200 miles. And if you forget something, it could be a serious problem. So, planning ahead, making sure that packing list is solid, I think is really important. Um, and then I think my last tip, as far as prepping ahead of time, and this might not be applicable to everybody, especially if you're not going too far, you're okay with eating whatever on the road, maybe not as important. But if you have a dietary restriction like I do, or you simply just want to like eat maybe healthier than what you're going to get right off the highway, I would say meal prepping is a really solid choice. So like I'll usually like prep things that I know are going to last in my cooler for a few days. And so maybe I'll make like a pasta salad or a tofu egg salad type thing, or I'll make like my lentil sloppy joes. And so I'll just have that in our Cabela cooler, similar to like a Yeti cooler, where things last for up to a week. And so I also think like dehydrated meals are also a really solid choice. Again, just gets a few more veggies into your diet while you're driving on endless highways. So thinking about food for me is really important. So would recommend it to others.
Yeah, freeze dried meals are like my bread and butter when I'm on these road trips. They're actually really good too. But yeah, I think everything you said, preparation, 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 especially if you've never done this before. Make sure your car, number one priority, is in working order, like you said, Abigail. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that yourself too, you can take it to a mechanic. I think the last time I got my car checked was when I moved to Los Angeles, where I am now. And it was about $45. So it's not super expensive to have a professional check out your car and make sure that it's not going to break down along the way. And then, yeah, like you said, packing everything you need, plan your route, just prepare as much as you can, be as proactive as you can before you hit the road. Laura, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was said. One thing that I would add is check the weather for where you are planning on going, because it could be May and it's sunny and beautiful along the coast, but if you drive into California's mountains, it'll still be snowy and you will need to put chains on your tires. And if you don't know how to put chains on your tires, it can be really unfortunate to have to pull off to the side of the road and like look at this little YouTube video of how to put chains on. Like, I've done it before, it's not terrible, but if you know that there's going to be snow somewhere that you're driving, even if it's the spring or the fall, like you need to know how to put on chains, or you need to have a car that can function without chains. Similarly, in terms of weather, if you're driving through any desert regions during flash flood season, which is like late summer, early fall, just be really mindful of, if it starts to rain, you don't want to be stuck at a low elevation. You want to be able to get somewhere quick. And I personally would just stop driving, because flash floods can be really scary. And just like, I would not want to get caught in a flash flood in the desert. So check the weather ahead of time. and make sure that you know what kind of driving conditions you're going to be dealing with.
Yeah, and that kind of all plays into safety too, which we're for sure going to touch on in just a little bit as well. But all wonderful advice from you guys. Again, just be as proactive as possible when you plan your road trip. And it's just a more isolated form of travel than others. So, it might just be you out there. So you need to set yourself up for success to avoid as many problems as possible down the road.
Speaking of it just being you out there on the road, something else that I wanted to mention was try to know how to change a flat tire if you can, or make sure at least that you have a spare tire in your car. Like accidents do happen. I have popped a tire on multiple road trips, and at this point now I know how to change a tire. But the first time it happened, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, I am so far out from any major city. I had to call like roadside assistance, and it was going to take hours for them to get there and like there might not have been cell service. So it's just try to know how to change a tire if you're going on like a really major road trip. I know this sounds scary. It was scary to me, but it's actually not that difficult. And for me, it felt really empowering to be like, I can change my own tire if I get into trouble. And that was a really nice feeling.
Now, what are the best things to do on a road trip? So I'll start here. I think road trips for me are the best photo opportunity trips. Like some of the best photos I've ever taken were on the road. So you'll see things on the side of the road that catch your eye left and right. And the great thing about driving is that you can pull off and do things at your own pace. So if you want to hone your photography skills, road trips are a fantastic setting to break out the camera. And on that note, I think you can really plan your road trip around a hobby. So, for example, surfing the West Coast, rock climbing the best national parks, and then photography, like I said. So, one time I took a trip with my brother to Yosemite to capture the annual Fire Falls event, which is when the sun hits this
Okay.
waterfall in Yosemite Valley from a very particular spot. And there's a really small window every single year. I think it's just like a 2 days where the light hits this waterfall at the exact point where it gives this illusion that the waterfall is a stream of lava, like, flowing off the mountain. So we took an entire road trip from Arizona, I think it was, like, 5 days long, just to see this event, and that event sparked the idea for the whole thing, and we ended up seeing so many other incredible things along the way that we didn't expect, simply with this one single goal to start with. I think that's the beauty of road tripping is that you'll always encounter these extra and unexpected gems along the way. So, Laura, what do you enjoy doing most on road trips?
Like you mentioned, finding all the hidden gems and just finding things that I would never really go to unless I was driving through that area. On my road trip from San Francisco to Denver, I mentioned that we drove through southern Wyoming. And I think all my friends were like, let's just shoot right through. Let's not pull over. There's nothing to do in southern Wyoming. And I was like, there's got to be some stuff. And so I looked it up, and there's like one of the best rock climbing places in Wyoming is in southern Wyoming, like 2 minutes off the freeway. So we just went and like bounded through this beautiful bouldery area, and it was so much fun. And again, like I would have just never gone to see that unless I was driving on this highway and looking up like cool stuff to do that's not too far out of the way. So making time for little excursions, like it's not just about getting from one place to the other. It's about all of the different things that you see on the way and all the side trips you can take. Another thing that I really like to do while road tripping is try to make time to find some really good food. I know that it can be really tempting to just like get fast food when you're driving and you just want to keep going. And I've definitely done that many, many times. But like there's certain areas of the Western United States that just has really unique food. Like if you're in Arizona or Southern California, like we have a ton of Hispanic influence. So there's a lot of really good like Mexican food. So if you're someone who hasn't really been to anywhere close to the Mexican border before and you're in Southern California or Arizona, like you have to get Mexican food at some point. And similarly, if you're driving up through Northern California and you're on like the Oregon coast or the Northern California coast, there's incredible seafood because everything is just so close to the ocean. So I would recommend trying to find some food from the areas that you're in and not just going to all the fast food places.
Yeah, and I would agree with that too. I would say that when I'm on the road, again, I love to meal prep, but I love seeking out the regional specialties and to pair everything you were saying, Laura. I agree with all of that in addition to the Native American influence that you'll get in Arizona and New Mexico as well. I think are some of the most yummy things that I've eaten while I'm on the road. So, get some green chili and eat a lot of blue corn and all of that while you're in that region. So, yeah, in addition to eating while I'm on the road, I also just love outdoor recreation, and so a lot of my trips is centered around specific outdoor destinations, of course, the national parks. But aside from just hiking, I also am a big skier. So I'll go out of my way to find some ski hills. As I mentioned earlier, canyoneering in Utah is special, rock climbing. I am yet a surfer, but I would say that if I spent more time on the coast, that's something that I would also engage in. So, yeah, seeking out unique outdoor activities, especially to a particular region, I think is special while you're on the road. And just to agree with you both, I think that stopping often is the best way to go on a road trip. There's if you're just driving for 8 hours straight, you're not really seeing a place. You're seeing that highway. I mean, granted, there's a lot of places in the Western United States that just driving is an experience in itself, but stop often and see a little bit more just going off the highway even a bit. So would recommend.
Absolutely.
My motto is always take the scenic route. And just anytime you're driving, there could be a shorter way to get from point A to point B, or there could be a scenic way. And I would always do the scenic way.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest beauty of a road trip. So, Abigail, I'll start with you for this next question. What is the best time of year to road trip the Western United States?
I think it kind of depends on the destination. I think Laura mentioned earlier that if you're driving along the coast of California and then you enter into the mountains, the kind of weather you might experience in a month like May can be vastly different. And so I think that when it comes to mountain destinations, I would say that a road trip isn't the most ideal in the winter time, even though there's lots of winter recreation such as skiing or snowboarding. Some of the mountain passes can close. It's just potentially more dangerous to go through those passes. So I think that in the summertime in mountain states, mountainous regions generally is going to be more ideal. So I would say May to September is probably the best period of time to plan a mountain trip. When you think about like desertous destinations, I would say like early spring or late fall or even winter, right, are all ideal. You just don't want to go in the peak of summer. I'm sure, Betty, you can kind of speak to that growing up in Arizona, how better for indoor activities if you're
Yes.
going to the desert in July.
Yeah, for
So.
sure. Oh my gosh, do not take a road trip through Arizona in the summertime because it's really hard to enjoy the trip when you barely want to set foot outside. And it's that hot. If you haven't experienced the heat before, I mean, last year we had over 100 days that were over 100 degrees in Arizona for the summer months, which it basically starts like May through early September. So it's not ideal. If you have time off outside of the summer months, you'll be golden. Like we have some of the most gorgeous weather, not just in Arizona, but New Mexico, a bunch of these southern desert regions, Southern California as well, that are just so, so beautiful in the wintertime where, other parts of the country, everyone's shoveling snow out of their driveways. So if you can set aside time for a road trip in the fall, winter, and early spring, you're going to have a great time in the desert.
Yeah, I think I can speak more to a coastal road trip and maybe road tripping through states like California, Oregon, and Washington. A lot of people think that summertime is the best time to visit. The weather is beautiful in summer, but once you get into Northern California, and I believe this probably happens in the Oregon coast as well, the inland areas are so hot in the summertime that coastal areas get a lot of fog. And there's this really big, like, marine layer that happens. And so sometimes, like, I always say this to people that are going to San Francisco in the summertime, there's going to be fog. It's going to be like 60 degrees and foggy. It's not like beach fun, yay, California. Like, so I think that early fall is actually a really wonderful time to road trip through California, Oregon, and Washington. The fall foliage in the mountains as well as in like the Pacific Northwest is going to be absolutely stunning. You'll have less people overall, especially if you're trying to go to like national parks. Like Yosemite during the summertime is so incredibly crowded. And so I would really recommend early fall because I think it's the best weather. It'll be cheaper prices and you'll see some really, really wonderful fall foliage.
So now I want to discuss accommodation. Laura, where should drivers stay on a road trip?
I mean, I'm always partial to camping or motels. I'm not a big hotel on a road trip person unless I've like done a really big hike or done something outdoors that I just want to go back and have like a spa day. So sometimes I will treat myself like that, but I think that leaving some flexibility in your plans for where you're going to stay that night is huge. And so that's why I choose to go with motels sometimes because you can typically always find a motel that's going to be affordable and probably will have empty rooms. I like to schedule my accommodation not super far in advance because it just depends on if I see something really cool while I'm driving. I want the flexibility to pull over and spend like 2 or 3 hours exploring a new area that I didn't have on my itinerary already. And so usually I'll just save my accommodation planning until like the day of if it's motels. However, if I'm planning a camping trip, then I always reserve campsites ahead of time.
Yeah, very good advice there. Abigail, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I would really just echo what Laura is saying. I feel like camping
Mhm.
is my preferred method. Dispersed camping specifically is most ideal in a lot of those remote areas. But, if I'm going on a summer road trip in Colorado, finding camping last minute can definitely be a hit or miss. And I have slept in my fair share of Walmart parking lots, which is not the most ideal while on the road. Do what you got to do. But I would say that reserving your campsites in the more popular states and regions is definitely a good move. If I'm not camping, I am usually doing similar to what Laura is saying. I'm going to do like a budget hotel or motel just as a spot to sleep, then take a shower. But generally I'm pretty budget conscious while traveling, unless there's like a really specific destination type hotel that happens to be on the route. Otherwise, yeah, I'm probably just gonna save my money for doing the activities while on the road. So
Yeah, it kind of seems ironic that it's like you're booking camping, but you're not booking your hotels or motels. I just went to Crested Butte from Denver last summer, and we made the mistake of not booking our camping ahead of time. And we couldn't even find dispersed camping either. It was so jam packed. So we ended up getting the only available campsite, which was on like a pile of rocks. It was so awful and uncomfortable. We popped our inflatable mattress. Like you definitely if you're planning on going to this gorgeous destination, there's probably a lot of other people also doing that. So, make sure you look into camping reservations if that's your preferred accommodation. But yeah, I think accommodation is really it really depends on your budget. When I did my road trip from Arizona to Washington with my cousin, we were only going to transport her car to Washington. So, we stayed in hotels and motels there, and that trip also going through California was one of the most expensive road trips of my life. Actually, it was the most expensive. It was great, but even staying in these dingy little motels, they were still like upwards of $150 a night for the most basic accommodations. So, if you are able to spend a little bit more, make sure you prioritize your comfort since you are going to need to be well rested for your trip as well.
I just also wanted to add to on one particular road trip through Colorado, my husband and I rented a camper van through Outdoorsy, thinking that that would be, it would allow us to have flexibility, right? We could kind of take our own pace and not have to worry about getting to a reserved campsite. But it also would take away the worry that dispersed camping would be used up. And I thought this would be a budget method. But between the cost of the van rental and then just the gas, I'm not used to putting so much gas into a large vehicle. So it honestly didn't save us a lot of money. So if you're thinking about going the camper van route or lugging along an RV, you probably want to plan your gas budget in advance because it might actually be cheaper just to go the standard camping route or again, reserving sites in advance. So
Yeah, very good point. Those large vehicles are such gas guzzlers, and you don't realize it until you're at the pump how much worse it is than a normal car. And one last note I want to make is when you're on a road trip, you can try to plan to stay with family and friends along the way. I think road tripping is one of the best ways to reconnect with people in your life that you may not have seen in a while. So it's really great to stop along the way to see old friends or maybe your cousins or whoever might live in these places that you haven't been to. And it's also a great way to save money if you're staying with people you know. So finally, I want to discuss safety. And a few things that come to mind for me are getting enough sleep. I try not to drive more than 10 hours a day when I road trip because I think by that ninth hour, I'm just like falling asleep at the wheel, which is, it's a terrible feeling to be that exhausted. So if you ever feel too tired to drive, don't risk it. Abigail discussed earlier, you should try to plan where you're staying ahead of time so you know exactly how long you're going to be driving and when you'll be arriving. But if for some reason you don't have the details in order and you just feel way too tired on the road, pull over in a safe spot and just take a little nap before you continue on. Try not to get to that point, but if you do, get some rest, then continue your drive. And another thing, also keep an eye on the gas because one time I almost ran out of gas in the redwoods and it was one of the scariest moments for me because we had just left Eureka, California, and I just assumed that there'd be a bunch of gas stations along the way, and we, immediately got into the redwoods, and I had, an eighth of a tank of gas, and I thought, "Oh, it's gonna be cheaper when we get out of town." And we sputtered into the very last gas station in the middle of nowhere. Like, if it weren't for that gas station, we would have been stranded in this massive, dense forest that was, kind of terrifying. We would have absolutely been there for hours waiting for someone to help us. There was no one around. I also ended up paying like $6.50 a gallon for the gas at this place in the middle of nowhere too. So, be aware of the state of your car just to make sure you're extra safe on the trip.
Yeah, and to that point, Betty, I would also say too, I know Laura being in California has a different opinion on this, but I would say that depending on your destination or various states that you might be driving through, definitely research ahead of time before renting or driving an electric vehicle because it's something that I've considered on previous trips. Obviously, wanting to cut down emissions and be more eco friendly, but a lot of these remote destinations do not have charging facilities frequently available. I specifically think about a road trip that I planned through Wyoming not too long ago and was planning on renting a vehicle. It was actually through Wyoming and heading into South Dakota. And I'm kind of glad that I rethought that choice. One, because it's one of the most least populated places. If you have any kind of car trouble, run out of electricity, can't find a charging station, again, that just again speaks to planning and you might not find very many charging stations in some of these more remote states. I think another thing too is depending on where you're going, you maybe don't want to draw too much attention to yourself, especially if you may be a solo traveler. And so there's certain places that I'm glad I'm not maybe driving a Tesla and drawing too many eyeballs. So I think that's maybe something to consider as well, depending on where you're headed.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that. I have rented a Tesla for a road trip before. This was not in the United States, but this was a road trip that I did when I was briefly living in Australia. And we rented a Tesla to go camping. And the look on everyone's faces when we pulled up to this like remote Australian campsite in a Tesla with just like everyone around us had these big like trucks and camper vans. But we did it because the electric vehicle cost was the same as the cost of a regular car. And we figured we wouldn't have to pay for gas. And we looked it up and there were charging stations along the way. So if you are in an area of the world or like California where there's a lot of charging stations, you can save money on gas by renting an electric vehicle. You just need to make sure that you'll be able to break up your drive and be able to find charging spots when you need it. But yeah, I second what you said. You can get some weird looks, especially if you're in like a more rugged national park kind of area.
Yeah, so always going back to just planning your route and being prepared. So I think also bringing an emergency car kit is super important, like having jumper cables, a flashlight, a blanket, non-perishable food, just things if you get stranded. I think that's probably the worst thing that could happen is you get stranded on your road trip because of some kind of car trouble or you get lost and then you don't have any resources to help you out. So make sure you invest in that or you can also invest in a roadside assistance service like AAA. I have AAA and while it can take a while for them to show up to help you when you call, especially if you're like in the middle of nowhere, it's really comforting just to know that like if I do get into a bind or have an emergency, that I can call AAA and it's not gonna cost me a bazillion dollars to have someone come and get my car out of there.
Yeah, definitely. I would add a couple more safety tips as well. I think that, again, if you're planning ahead, I think it's really helpful to share your itinerary with an emergency contact or even multiple contacts, right? Like, there have been times on road trips that we've taken where we haven't had service for maybe 2 or 3 days. And so I feel like it's really important to just kind of send, an update to those emergency contacts whenever you do have service because you're sometimes traveling through remote areas. And I just think it's important to have someone kind of, make sure that somebody has your back, right? So I would say that in addition to also researching your destination, I think that most of the places that we've talked about are very, very much safe for the large majority of travelers. But I would say that there have been places that I've driven through that, frankly, I would not recommend my friends who are maybe LGBTQ or people of color or even solo women to travel through because even if you're maybe getting to your final destination and that's a safe place, I do think that there's remote areas on the road that maybe aren't as welcoming to marginalized communities. So I would highly recommend if you especially plan on stopping in some of these more remote places to, yeah, just do your research ahead of time. I think that public forums, things like Reddit, you can kind of get a little bit more of a feel for maybe where you're headed to. And I don't think this is just true of the American West. I think there's places all over the country that should maybe be given a second thought before spending any serious time there. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point to make. And also, it's not just in the isolated areas, too. Like, you could be stopping at a very populated city, but then, you find a really good deal at a motel in the sketchiest part of that city, which is what I did when I was road tripping up the coast. And I stopped in Santa Barbara, which, for people who don't know, Santa Barbara is a very, very wealthy, very gorgeous little coastal town just north of LA. And, you think, oh, I'm going to Santa Barbara. It's going to be like such a nice, safe place. And I stayed at this motel that was really sketchy. Like, there was music blasting from the motel right below us, and there were people in the parking lot who were very obviously doing like illegal things. And I just felt really unsafe there and I didn't sleep well. And that kind of set the tone for the next day of driving. So, yeah, like Abigail said, like definitely do some research on where you're headed, where you're planning on stopping too, because you don't want to end up in an area where you feel unwelcome or unsafe. All right. So, to wrap up our episode today, I want to ask you both, what is the number one reason why somebody should take a road trip through the American West? So, Laura, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the Western United States has some of the most diverse landscapes anywhere on the planet. I mean, you can see the tallest trees in the world and the hottest place on Earth, and they're like 7 hours away from each other. And I've traveled to, at this point, over 40 different countries, and I still think that the Western United States is one of my favorite places to travel, like easily in the top 10 most beautiful places I've ever seen. So it's just, yeah, really the landscapes are what do it for me.
And Abigail, what about you?
I think that going on a road trip really just gives you a greater understanding and appreciation of a specific destination. If you come to Colorado and you just go to Denver, in my opinion, you have not seen Colorado, right? I think that if you venture off the beaten path or even just make a circuit, make it a point to like hit multiple destinations, you can actually, I feel like, again, have a deeper understanding and appreciation for that state because it's so vastly different. I mean, to Laura's point, the landscapes can be vastly different, but I also think the people and the lifestyles are very different as well. So I think that, yeah, it's an experience that I highly recommend to anybody. Get in the car and see a place on a deeper level.
I like what you said about the people being different because I think that's something that gets lost a lot of times is that maybe people group like we're all Americans, but there's so many unique different cultures within the American West. I mean, like when you're driving through Arizona and New Mexico and you're on native land, like you'll get this really incredible appreciation for Native American culture. And when you're driving through Utah, there's all the like Mormon influence of, you can't buy alcohol in certain areas or you can go to the soda shops that are super famous now. And so I think just the people in the Western United States, there's such a variation in the people, and it's a really wonderful way to get a little bit more of appreciation of all these different microcosms of culture.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Road trips really show you how to enjoy the journey, as corny as it sounds. I mean, we live in such a fast paced society nowadays, and I think a road trip is the perfect way to reconnect with nature and slow down and take things at your own pace while simultaneously falling in love with all these beautiful places you would have never known existed otherwise. And the Western United States just offers so many of those places. Okay, that's our show today. Remember to like and subscribe to the Travel Living podcast. It means the world to us to have your support. Abigail and Laura, thank you both so much for sharing your road trip expertise. It's been so great to have you both on the show today, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves as much as I enjoyed it.
I had so much fun. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course, and thank you, listeners. We hope you feel more prepared and completely convinced to take a road trip through the Western United States now. Drive safe. We'll see you next time on the Travel Lemming podcast.